On January 30th, 2023, a terrified boy reached out to a podcast for help and legal advice. Why? Well, his adoptive father had been sexually abusing him and his 8 brothers for years. This is the story of how Haim Nassim Cohen fooled everyone with his perfect father facade on TikTok. Fooling the world.
And you met with the father who adopted several foster kids, and he says as much as he's given to them, they've given a lot more back.
January 16th, 2017, Haim Nassim Cohen shared his first YouTube video featuring his 9 adopted sons on his channel called Our Unique Family.
And together we are the Cohens, and this is our unique family blog.
Haim presented himself as a single Hasidic man, and along with his sons, they documented their lives as an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family on social media and a website he managed. With over 310,000 followers and videos that have been viewed more than 5 million times, their family's 2 TikTok channels have become quite popular. There, the boys, some now adults, showcase their Jewish culture through dancing, birthday celebrations, cooking traditional food, and addressing online anti-Semitism. On YouTube, they documented their homeschooling arrangements and day-to-day lives. Through his interviews, Cohen presented his household as a unique family that was thriving and giving back to the community through donations and civil work. As a result of all this, many saw Haim as an altruistic man with a heart of gold, until one day, everything changed. A single incident would shatter the image of this perfect, unique family, revealing something more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. The facade falls.
Tonight, an adoptive father of 9 boys is in jail, charged with horrific crimes. He is accused of abusing one of those boys, who called into a podcast trying to get help.
February 10th, 2023, Cohen was arrested by the police following their successful tracing of an IP address belonging to one of his sons. Days before, this son had reached out to a podcast in a desperate attempt to seek help and expose the truth about his seemingly perfect father and the abuse that he and his brothers were suffering at his hands behind closed doors. On January 30th, the petrified boy reached out to the Blind Skinned Beauty YouTube podcast to reveal the harrowing story of his adoptive father's ongoing sexual abuse toward him and his brothers. He told him the abuse had been going on for years, and he had no idea what to do.
He makes us go and sit in his room, and we watch TV.
After hearing this shocking story, the host, Twaya Paynes, was horrified. She decided to bring her friend, an ex-cop from New Jersey, onto the podcast to help this boy who was seeking legal advice. Both of them encouraged the boy to go to the police right away, but he explained that he was scared of retaliation. He said he was waiting until his 18th birthday, which was only 16 days away, because he felt helpless and feared that the police wouldn't believe him. The boy went on to reveal that there had already been 8 investigations by Child Protective Services against his father, but each time his father was acquitted due to lack of evidence. The boys always took their father's side out of fear. The boy would even share that his father forced him to volunteer at a local police facility where he was around cops every week, but even then, he was too scared to speak up. He also mentioned that one of the CPS investigations that was triggered was when his brother ran away from home to escape the abuse, only to be brought back by deputy constables. When the other boys were interviewed following the incident, they all sided with their father. Additionally, their brother's testimony was dismissed because he was on psychotic medication when he left home. The boy disclosed that he and most of his brothers were all prescribed these medications by a doctor who was a friend of their father's. So this way, for years, Haim made it seem like the boys had cognitive problems and that their words were unreliable. So this boy kept quiet. He knew that if he ever reported what was happening to the police, none of his brothers would side with him.
So I don't want to provide too much detailed information. I just want to know what should be done.
Following Haim's arrest, it was discovered that his actions toward his sons were even more horrifying than what the boy had disclosed on the podcast. Investigators were able to confirm that 6 of the boys were confined to their rooms for most of the day. They were only permitted to leave once or twice a day to use the bathroom and eat a single meal. It was also reported that Haim would allegedly use pepper spray on the boys as a form of punishment if they dared to refuse him. What's worse, if they did disobey him, he would also force them to engage in sexual acts with one another. In the 40-minute podcast, host Twaya Paynes offered to give the boy the location of a safe place where he could stay until he turned 18. However, the boy declined, explaining that he couldn't leave his younger brothers behind.
I gave you a safe place to go.
Not entirely sure.
Why?
The boy also mentioned to the host that he was scared of ending up in jail for lying to the police and CPS many times, telling them there was no abuse, despite the fact that it started 2 weeks after they were adopted. It was obvious that his father had manipulated him into believing he would be in trouble, and even considered an accessory if he revealed the truth. The boy was suddenly cut off during the call, and everyone thought he had left the podcast, but he returned and told him that his dad had just called him and was on his way home. It was evident to everyone how frightened he was. The boy confessed that he was using a secret burner phone to get online and chat with the hosts, without his dad knowing. He mentioned that his dad had caught him trying to ask for help before. Back then, the boy met a friend online who helped to send him $200 on a Cash App so he could travel to Georgia and stay with him. But his dad had found out, smashed his phone, made him delete all his social media accounts, and took the money for himself. After the boy finished explaining the situation to the hosts, his voice started to crack. He quickly thanked him and hung up so he could delete all the apps from his phone and cover his tracks of using the internet. After this jaw-dropping podcast wrapped up, Haynes anxiously waited for a few days, hoping to hear from the boy again, as he had promised to reach out in 2 days. When she didn't receive any communication, she started to worry and decided to go to the police. Fortunately, they tracked the call to Haim's home using his IP address. Haim was finally arrested and the boy was questioned. At first, he denied making the call, but when he heard his own voice on the podcast playback, he began shaking, tilted his head down, and admitted that everything he said on the podcast was true. Soon after, 5 of his remaining 8 brothers also came forward with reports of ongoing abuse, prompting police to launch an investigation. However, the 3 remaining adult brothers stood by their father. Ultimately, Cohen was charged with 8 offenses, including injury to a minor, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault of a minor, and continuous sexual abuse of a minor. But the story didn't end there. After Haim's arrest, even more shocking revelations came to light. Not Haim's first rodeo. 2018, Haim applied for a program that allowed him to host foreign exchange students, and unfortunately he was approved. Toward the end of the year, a student from Spain was placed with the Cohens. It didn't take long before Haim began abusing that boy too. According to court documents, the student was caught allegedly shoplifting socks at a Walmart, with Haim telling the boy to touch him to make up for it. This went on for about 8 months, before the student confided in teachers at his school about what was happening. The boy was removed from his home immediately, and Haim was arrested and charged with felony indecency. But the thing is, Haim didn't stay in jail for long. He was released on bail after claiming he was in hospice care for a terminal illness. And well, when it comes to this part, photos from his family home showed him often wearing an oxygen mask and sometimes using a wheelchair. There were many pictures of him in the hospital posted on social media over the years. February 2023, when he appeared in court for his hearing, Haim was once again in a wheelchair, wearing an oxygen mask, and seemed to be spitting blood. However, things may not be as they appear, because during his questioning, the boy who spoke on the podcast also informed authorities everything he does is fake. He went on to explain that Haim was pretending to have medical issues to gain sympathy and to enhance the golden father image he portrayed over the years. But that's not all, because Cohen would do this to avoid any legal consequences and make money from the situation. 2020, one of Haim's sons was coerced into starting a GoFundMe campaign, asking for donations for medical expenses without specifying his father's supposed conditions. Surprisingly, he managed to raise over $2,000. And here's where things get even more interesting. Since adopting the boys, Haim never held a job that brought in any income. The family relied solely on online donations, gifts, and social media sponsorships. Haim also received stipends for fostering children, but it's unclear how he covered the family's expenses. So it is puzzling how Haim was allowed to adopt 9 children and host multiple foreign exchange students in his 4-bedroom house. At one point, there were 11 boys living with Haim. It's also unclear why there wasn't a thorough investigation after Haim was charged with abusing the exchange student. In 2019, following his arrest and charges, the court prohibited Haim from being within 1,000 feet of places where children gather. However, this rule didn't seem to apply to his own children. It's evident that Haim's carefully crafted persona deceived everyone. He even received a certificate of appreciation from Child Protective Services for his fostering work. But little did anyone know that Haim was fabricating everything in his life, including his past and religious background. Law faith. Recent evidence and investigations suggest that Haim may have actually lied about his Jewish background and that of his adopted children, whom he claimed were all born Jewish. In interviews, he stated that his life's mission was to ensure that Jewish foster children are placed in Jewish homes. However, after his arrest, a lawyer who reviewed the adoption records found this to be untrue. Sherry Chandler, the lawyer representing the exchange student, revealed,
"None of the children came from Jewish families, but Haim had them take on Jewish identities after adopting them. He changed their names during the adoption process, had them grow their hair, and dressed them. He claims they speak Hebrew or Yiddish, but I don't think any of them do."
Haim also gave conflicting information in different interviews about how many of the boys were native Yiddish speakers and how many spoke Hebrew. He also provided inconsistent accounts of his background, stating sometimes he would grow up in various Hasidic movements in New York City, and even calling himself a rabbi. Sherry Chandler commented,
"He's clearly not a rabbi. I think he woke up one day and said, 'I'm Jewish,' and went to Dallas County to have his name changed."
And this actually seems to be true. A member of Houston's Orthodox community said Haim first showed up around 2009 or 2010. He claimed to have come from different Hasidic communities in New York City and Jerusalem, even at one point saying that he was part of a family rescued from Yemen by the Satmar Hasidic movement to explain his complexion. However, the Orthodox community soon realized that Haim was a fraud. In one instance, he claimed to speak Yiddish but was unable to hold a conversation with a Yiddish speaker. During an interview, a member of the Orthodox community described Haim as a master manipulator, saying,
"This guy made up a whole backstory. He's a very smart guy. This guy is a Ted Bundy level sociopath. He's very intelligent, very conniving, very manipulative."
Yet the question remains, what is the truth about Haim's background? According to legal documents, Haim was actually born Jeffrey Luchan Vahil in Odessa, Texas in 1984. Records show that someone with that name graduated from Odessa High School in 2005, and a newspaper article from that year placed him in the city. In 2009 and 10, he changed his name many times before settling on Haim Nassim Cohen. Court documents showed that he used various names and aliases, including Chaim Nassim Vehil, Gabriel Jeffrey Vehil, and Gabriel Rosenberg. After his arrest, his mother, Corina Luján, shared the full story. In this interview, she disclosed that their family is Catholic and Mexican-American. She confirmed that Haim was born Jeffrey Luchan Vehil and was, in fact, once an altar boy at a church in Odessa. He later explored different Christian faiths before moving to Dallas and becoming interested in Judaism. She said,
"He came to us one day and said, 'I'm going to convert to Judaism.' I was shocked at first because at one point in his life, he wanted to become a priest, but then I thought it was beautiful."
However, there's no evidence that Haim ever converted to Judaism, and he never claimed to have converted, except when he requested to adopt a Jewish name in court. His mother was also quick to defend him, stating that he would never hurt his sons. She believed his goal in life was to help kids that nobody wanted. She also claimed that the boy who made the initial allegations was lying and suffered from mental disorders. She said,
"He can change his personality in a split second and go from talking in Chinese to doing high kicks with his legs in the air. He has some problems, and I think he's convinced his younger siblings into believing they were
by their father." Haim's brother, Eric Vahil, supported their mother's claims and called for medical records to be provided to show whether the boys were victimized. He said that if they were sexually assaulted, doctors could determine if there was any evidence of abuse. Prosecutors, however, argued that there was damning evidence that Haim had subjected his sons to excessive abuse, mentally, physically, and sexually. Despite the allegations, Haim's mother and brother were not the only ones who fiercely defended him. Like father, like son. Haim's oldest son, Avshalom, who's now 23 years old, quickly came to his father's defense. He supported his father and echoed his grandmother's claims that his brother was lying and dealing with multiple personality disorder, autism, and cognitive issues. Avshalom passionately stated,
"My father never abused me. He's a great father that would never hurt any of us. If I saw anything out of order by anyone, I would have done everything in my power to protect my brothers."
Haim's other two older sons also stood by their father's side. They all went to family court in Houston in this attempt to gain custody of their remaining 6 brothers, who were minors and had been placed in child protective services. However, Avshalom and his 2 brothers never got the chance to fight for custody.
A Houston man accused of abusing several of his adopted children.
Now, one of his adopted sons is also accused of abusing some of his siblings.
July 2023, Avshalom was arrested and charged in Houston with felony assault of a minor. When looking into Haim's extensive list of victims, it was discovered that Avshalom Cohen was also responsible for assault assault on one of his adopted brothers in 2020. Avshalom allegedly coerced his brother into sexual abuse by offering him nicotine vapes and energy drinks as bribes. The victim had feared repercussions if he refused his brother's advances due to the threats inside the home and Avshalom's reputation for being violent. It was reported that Avshalom not only abused his brother, but he did so without any interference or pressure from his father. In another incident, Avshalom got into a fight with one of his younger adopted brothers, who was arguing with their father. When that happened, Avshalom, who was 20 at the time, stepped in, pushed his brother to the ground, and proceeded to beat him while hurling insults. He even went as far as saying,
"That's what you get, you little ass kid."
But wait, there's more. Avshalom was also arrested last year for human smuggling near the Texas-Mexico border. He was caught driving a van with 8 undocumented migrants, along with a firearm and a fake police badge. However, he was let out on bail at that time. But this time, Avshalom is behind bars, awaiting further legal proceedings along with his father. The Mask. During Hayim's 2023 hearing, Jana Oswald, a prosecutor from the Harris County District Attorney's Office, mentioned that they had looked into multiple reports of abuse throughout the years, but never had enough evidence to press charges. She said,
"This was a household of boys that were extremely abused and neglected. They were threatened. They were in fear for their safety. That mask, along with the children's inability to find their voice yet, allowed the abuse to go on for a long time."
The boy who shared his story with the podcast also said that they were experts at putting on an invincible mask. They were able to convince everybody they were the perfect family, despite the horrors they were facing when no one was looking.
Because the mask that we put on is damn near invincible.
And let's not forget that this mask managed to deceive both the CPS and the police, resulting in Hayim being acquitted 8 times. But was that mask truly that effective? Or should the system consider being more rigorous and thorough in their investigations, particularly when it concerns the well-being of minors?